what's up guys? Shelby here, and we are on our last video of part 1 for CSS of BizStream Academy. Now this video is going to be a quick one, so I wanted to take some time to go back and review what we went over in the last video when we talked about inline elements versus block elements and adding some spans to your HTML and targeting them with your CSS. In my example, I went ahead and added a few classes to my already existing elements in my CSS. When you add these attributes to your HTML, you can add as many classes and IDs as you want to. So on line 31, you can see that this div only has one class of content, whereas this paragraph tag on line 32 has two classes of decorated and emphasized. And classes can be reused all across your site. So this is where things can get kind of tricky, but pretty powerful if you know how to use them correctly. So in my example, I have my styled heading here. And nested inside of my styled heading class is this span with the class of decorated. Now this class decorated is already being used down here on line 32, but it's not 100% similar because this one does not have the class of emphasized in it. This is when your CSS rules can become pretty powerful, because if you look at my site, this heading has this span that's pretty similar to this element down here, but not 100% the same. And that's because I use that rule of specificity as well as position selectors to target different elements on my site in terms of those spans that we added in the last video. So I added a few rules here. I have my styled heading and my nested styled heading rule that we went over, but I also added this class of emphasized that has a now font size of 35 pixels and a new property called text align, which is alignment of the text in your HTML. So this is saying I want anything with the class of emphasized to have a bigger font size as well as this text align center applied to it. So on my site, you can see this text is now bigger as well as aligned in the center of my website. But it also has this different font that's similar to the one up here. Now, that is because these both share this same class of decorated. This class decorated only has one declaration that is changing the font family to that dancing script. Not only are these styles getting applied to that content through that class, but these styles in this class of emphasize are being applied to it as well. So this content down here has 3 declarations being applied to it, whereas this one only has 1. Now again, this can get a bit confusing in terms of writing your rules, so if you want to practice just working on writing your CSS rules and then condensing them later with these position selectors, feel free to do that as well. I just wanted to show you an example of what different classes can look like when you're adding these spans to your HTML. You can see that example here on line 20 where I added that span that wraps that content in my header. So hopefully you guys had enough time to go over to add some spans to your site and start adding more complex styles to your code. In this last video, we're going to talk about something called pseudo classes. Pseudo classes are used to target specific HTML elements, and that is based on a change in its state, its location compared to other HTML elements, as well as attributes. You can target these states by adding a colon after a CSS selector and then the state of the HTML that you want to target. This basically is saying that we are going to be able to add another symbol to our selectors to target these pseudo classes. So here's an example. In this example below, our A tag with the pseudo class of hover would be used if you wanted to target this link and change anything that happened to it once it was hovered. These pseudo classes are pretty fun to work with because they give you ability to start adding some interaction to your website. So in this example down here, this is saying on hover of any link on my website, I want the color of that link to change to blue. So let's go ahead and copy this CSS rule to add to our styles. Now this is important to remember when you're adding pseudo selector classes, you are not replacing the rules that are already there for that selector. So this rule for every A tag on line 19 does not go away, but rather this hover one gets added below it. So when I go to my website and I hit refresh and I find a link on my site, you can see that on hover, that CSS tells my browser that when you're hovering any link on my website, I want the color to change to blue. And notice we didn't use any JavaScript or anything like that. This is out of the box how pseudo selectors should be working. Now there's a list of pseudo selectors we can work with, but I really just want you to focus on adding this hover state to your links on your site. If you want, you can get a little bit creative and start adding these pseudo selectors to links that are nested in other things. So see if you can add a link that is nested inside of a span with a different class to be a different color than your normal links when you hover it. If you have any questions or want help on this one, feel free to let me know. Or if you can solve it, be sure to reach out and show me so I can see what you guys have been working on. Good luck.